Hello everybody and welcome to this month's online class. This is the month of October and today we are discussing a topical issue from the news. Okay, this class will be about 25 to 30 minutes and we'll get started now. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen and then I will bring up a news article for us to have a look at. Okay, here we go. Okay, now let's have a look at the first one here. Okay, and here we have our news article. Now, you will see the photograph there of this gentleman whose name is Michael Packard. And the story is a Cape Cod diver was just swallowed and spit out by a humpback whale. Okay, so the subject of the article is this gentleman, Michael Packard. Now we know he is a diver and he was diving at Cape Cod, which is in the north of the US, and he's had an adventure with a humpback whale. Okay, so we can see first of all in the headline there that he was swallowed and spit out by a humpback whale. Okay, so I thought I would highlight first spit out. We know when we're talking about spitting that we're talking about generally when we eat, okay? So expelling something from your mouth, okay? So that could be, usually we're talking about food or drink, okay? So we might say something like, so that's to spit. When we talk about to spit out, that means it means the same thing, but it has more of an action to it. Out, or you can use a noun or a pronoun between spit and out. So for example, you could say spit that out. Don't you know wild mushrooms can be poisonous? Okay. So in this instance, in this news article, obviously Mr. Packard was spat out by the humpback whale. Okay, but when we're talking about spitting something out, we can also use it in a couple of other ways. Okay, so it can also mean to say something, but to say it with difficulty. Okay, so for example, if I was to say to my friend who was trying to tell me something but couldn't say it very successfully, I might say, "Oh, for goodness sake, just spit it out. Just tell me what you're trying to say." Okay. Maybe the teacher asks you a question and you're having difficulty answering. You might say, "I tried spitting the answer out, but my nervousness made me stutter too badly." Okay. And then the third way we can use this phrase is if you're wanting to say something in a very aggressive or forceful manner. Okay. You might talk about somebody spitting out obscenities or spitting out rude language if they are trying to be aggressive towards you. So our example sentence here is the group of protesters, oh, I don't know why I did that, continued to spit obscenities out at us as we made our way to the car. Okay, I'm just going to minimize that for one brief moment. Okay, and go back into it again. Okay. And bring it over this side. About there. Okay, so now when we start to have a look at the article, the first line says, for 30 to 40 seconds, Michael Packard struggled to escape the whale's mouth and wondered if he would be swallowed whole. Now, when we talk about being swallowed whole, now we know to swallow means to ingest or to pass food and drink through the mouth. So it's basically the opposite of spitting out. So swallow, when we swallow something whole, we don't cut it into bits, or we don't bite it into small bits. We eat the entire thing, or we swallow the entire thing. Okay, so for example, we might say the lion swallows its prey whole. Fruit is swallowed whole by the bird. Okay, so it just means, for example, when you have a whale that is swallowing something, obviously it's not going to chew it up and cut it into small pieces. If a whale is swallowing a human, they will eat the human whole. Okay, there is also a second meaning here with swallow whole. In slang, this can mean if we swallow something whole, it can mean to believe or to accept something without question or doubt. Okay, so you might say, oh, she swallowed his lies whole. Okay, or they swallowed whole the argument that vaccines are unsafe. So that means they believed completely, without question, whatever they are told. Okay, so people might say to you, oh, don't swallow what he says whole. Okay, don't believe anything, or don't believe everything he says. Okay, so here's Mr. Packard, and he's in his hospital bed, recovering quite nicely. Obviously, he wasn't harmed. Okay, now the next paragraph, it talks about, in this story, a man was swallowed by a whale. And no, it didn't take place in the pages of the Old Testament to a man named Jonah. It happened to a lobster diver named Michael Packard off the coast of Provincetown, Massachusetts. Okay, so what are they talking about here? They're talking about the Old Testament and a man named Jonah. Okay, now for those of you who are Christians, you may be familiar with this story, the story of Jonah and the whale. If not, I will tell you a little bit about the background of this story. Okay, so in the Bible, the Christian Bible has the Old Testament and the New Testament. Okay, so the Old Testament means that's like the older part of the Bible, the older stories in the Bible. And one of these stories in the Old Testament was to do with a man named Jonah. Jonah, as we can see here, was an Israelite. Okay, that's what they called someone who, in the old days, who lived in Israel. And he was a man whom God had asked to become a prophet. Okay, so a prophet is someone who's like a speaker for God. Okay, so God wanted Jonah to do this for him, but Jonah refused, and instead he went to sea. So he went on a sea voyage. This made God very angry, and as a result, he decided to create a big storm. Okay, and the sailors on this ship knew that this storm was happening because God was angry. So they knew that Jonah had made God angry, and they decided to throw him off the ship, to throw him overboard, and try and save their ship. But Jonah didn't drown, because when he was thrown off the ship, he was swallowed by a whale. And in the story, he lived inside the whale for 3 days. Then after 3 days, the whale spit him out, and it spit him out on dry land. Okay, so because Jonah was saved, he was very thankful and he decided to listen to God. So he became a prophet for God. Okay, so when we talk about the story of Jonah and the whale, that means we're talking about this Bible story from the Old Testament. Okay, so we might say that Michael Packard is a modern version of Jonah and the whale because he was swallowed by the whale only briefly and he survived to tell the tale. Okay, so why is he a diver? What is Michael trying to catch when he's diving? He's trying to find lobsters. Okay, so that is the kind of diver that he is. Okay, so moving on. Now it says Michael had set off early in the morning, so he'd started out early in the morning on Friday, June 11, to dive for lobsters with his fishing partner, Josiah Mayo. After a disappointing first haul, Packard dove under the water to try again just before 8 a.m. Now, when we talk about a haul, what are we talking about? Well, we usually use this for fishing or transportation. So, when we haul something, we're talking about pulling something with force, to drag something or to draw something along with force. So when you see a fisherman pulling in the net, he's using an action with his arms to pull the net towards him. We would call that to haul. Okay, so if a fisherman is pulling a boat up onto the beach, we can also say he's hauling the boat onto the beach. Okay, the second meaning is to cart or to transport something. Okay, and usually that would be something quite big or heavy. Okay, so we might say the train hauled freight around the country. Okay, so when we use the word hauling or haul, we're talking about something that is generally quite big or something that's quite heavy. Okay, so when he's talking about, or the article talks about his first haul, that is haul being used as a noun, okay, something that is hauled. What has he hauled? He has obviously fished some lobsters and some fish from the bottom of the ocean. So he needs to drag or pull those fish up from the bottom of the ocean. So obviously the first time he tries to catch some fish, he doesn't catch many. Therefore his haul is disappointing. Okay, so what does he do? He dives under the water to try again. Now if we look at the past tense of dive, okay, so we know to dive means to swim underwater or to jump into water head first. Okay, so two different meanings of the word dive, right? If we use the word as in to swim underwater, we're talking about, for example, scuba diving. We are under the water and we swim along, okay? But dive can also mean to be outside the water and to jump in head first, that is to dive. So you can dive in the water or you can dive under the water. Okay, when we do that in the past tense, which one is correct? Dove or dived? Okay, actually both are correct. And sometimes it's just personal preference. I would never say dove, I would always say dived. Okay, but dove is not incorrect. Okay, so in the present tense would be I, you dive, he, she dives. Okay, past tense, I dove or I dived. He or she dived, we or they dove or dived. Okay, and both of these are generally accepted. It just tends to be more on personal preference. Okay, so he's dived under the water again, but in the next paragraph, as he scoured the sandy bottom of Herring Beach Cove, which you can see in the picture here. It looks rather lovely. Suddenly, something suddenly struck him from behind. All of a sudden, I felt this huge shove, and the next thing I knew, it was completely black, Packard later recalled. Okay, so what does it mean to scour? He's scouring the bottom of the cove, so he's scouring the sand under the water. Okay, so when we scour something, generally when we use this word, we're talking about cleaning something very thoroughly. So if you scour something by rubbing very vigorously, that's generally how we use the word to scour. Okay, so I would scour the sink, I would scour the bath. Okay, and I think from that meaning of to do something very thoroughly, we also get the meaning of to scour as in to make a very good search of something. Okay, so if we scour an area or scour a place, that means you're looking for something very thoroughly. So for example, our example sentence here would be, rescue crews had scoured an area of 30 square miles. Okay, so they were looking in that area of 30 square miles for somebody maybe who's missing. Okay, so if you're scouring, you're doing something very thoroughly, okay, whether it's cleaning something or looking for somebody. Okay, so he scours the sandy bottom of the cove, and then suddenly struck him or hit him from behind. So he felt a huge shove. So to shove, if we shove someone, it's not just, it's a little bit stronger than push, okay? So if we push someone, that can be quite, it can either be a soft push or a hard push, okay? But if we shove somebody, this means to push something or someone quite roughly, okay? So it's not a good idea to shove somebody. Okay, so he feels the shove from the whale. And what happens? From the surface, Mayo, who is Mr. Packard's friend, watched as Packard's air bubbles suddenly vanished, but he couldn't possibly have guessed what had happened to his partner below the waves. And to the next page, a humpback whale had accidentally swallowed Packard in one huge gulp. Okay, so let's have a look at gulp. We know we've been talking about swallowing, spitting, swallowing. Swallowing is, how is swallowing different from gulping? We say swallowing your food or gulping your food. Okay, if we are swallowing, we can do that quite slowly. Usually when we talk about gulping, we're talking about swallowing more quickly or swallowing a lot at one time, okay? So we might say he gulped down the last of his coffee. That means he's trying to drink quickly because maybe he must go to a meeting, okay? Or you might say she finished her drink in one gulp, okay? There, gulp is a noun and it is talking about the act of gulping food or drink, okay? So if you finish your drink in one gulp, that means one big mouthful and you finish all the drink, okay? So generally not a good idea to gulp your food because that can lead to indigestion, stomach troubles. Okay, so what happens when Mr. Packard is swallowed in one gulp? He's swallowed whole. Everything went dark, Packard said. I was like, oh my God, did I just get bit by a shark? Mr. Packard should have said, did I just get bitten by a shark? Then I felt around and I realized there was no teeth and I had felt really no great pain. Okay, then I realized, oh my God, I'm in a whale's mouth and he's trying to swallow me. Okay, so for a terrifying stretch of 30 to 40 seconds, Packard struggled in the darkness. Okay, so why do we say stretch here? When we talk about a stretch of time, we're talking about a period of time. Okay, that's all it means. So you could say for a terrifying period of time, 30 or 40 seconds, he struggled in the darkness. Okay, so we talk about a stretch of time, maybe a little bit longer. We want to talk about a slightly longer or more extended period of time. They probably use it here because he's talking about a terrifying period of time that probably seems longer than what it would if he wasn't so scared. Okay. Questions raced through his head. We use the word race here because we want to give the idea that he is scared, he is panicky, so his thoughts are what we say racing around his head. Now, he still had his breathing apparatus on. You can say apparatus or apparatus. Apparatus would be more American, whereas apparatus would be more UK. Okay, so apparatus just means the technical equipment or machinery that you need for a specific or particular activity or purpose. So, for example, you could also say equipment or gear. Okay, here they're talking about breathing apparatus. So, breathing apparatus is some kind of equipment that will help you to breathe. Okay, he's diving underwater, so he has some kind of scuba diving equipment to help him breathe. He will probably have the tank, scuba tank with oxygen and a mouthpiece. Okay, so that's his breathing apparatus. One can also have climbing apparatus. If you were climbing a mountain, maybe you might have hiking apparatus if you were doing some kind of maybe complicated hiking that involved some kind of technical equipment. Also medical apparatus. There is lots of technical equipment that doctors would need to do their job. Okay, so would he be stuck in the whale's mouth until he ran out of air? Okay, and he thinks to himself, okay, this is it, I'm going to die. Okay, he didn't think he was going to be able to get out of the whale's mouth. But then the whale started to shake its head and he felt himself zoom towards the surface. Okay, so we use zoom here because we want to give the impression, or the writer wants to give the impression of moving very quickly, hurrying, speeding, or racing towards the surface. Okay, so we all know the word zoom now because of the Zoom software. I presume they used that word because they wanted to give the impression of being able to have our communications move or travel very quickly. Okay. All right, so he's zooming towards the surface. And here he is with a lobster in his fishing boat, having a wonderful time. That is a very big lobster, I must say. Okay, and just the final part. Okay, we'll start here. Okay, so from their ship, Mayo saw a burst of white water. Okay, so because Michael has suddenly zoomed to the surface, all the action here is very quick. Okay, so the author uses the word burst because he wants to give the impression of something breaking open suddenly or uncontrollably, a kind of an explosion of water coming out in a burst of white water. Okay, so he sees the burst of water and he spots his friend soaring through the air. Okay, and another friend says, I saw Mike come flying out of the water, feet first, with his flippers on. Okay, so what does it mean, feet first? Well, when we say feet first, this is quite straightforward, I guess. It means you come out of somewhere, for example, the water, with your feet going first and your head going last. Okay, so he's coming up and out of the water, his feet would be here and his head would be down there. Okay, so for example, you could say, I jumped feet first through the window. Okay, usually a good idea to go feet first, not head first. Okay, so if you went head first through a window, dangerous because you could cut your head on the glass. Okay, a second meaning here of feet first, it also means without hesitation or without preparation. So when we talk about someone jumping in feet first, that means someone that just starts to do something without really thinking too much about it or without hesitating. Okay, so our example sentence here is, the show begins in such a way that it compels the audience to jump in feet first. Okay, so it's got a bit of an idea of bravery about it in that sense. Okay, and just finishing off here. Okay, so Mr. Packard says, I was inside it, it tried to eat me. And he gasped once they had him aboard. So here, the word gasp, we're talking about catching your breath or being slightly breathless because you're either in pain or you are scared or very surprised. Okay, so we might say to gasp in horror, to gasp in surprise. Okay, so obviously he's gasping with good reason because he's been in a whale's tummy. Okay, so Mayo was worried that his fishing partner had suffered broken bones or an embolism. When we talk about an embolism, it says it can happen when a diver surfaces too quickly. Okay, what we're talking about here is if you get an air bubble in your blood, it can travel through your artery and go to your brain or go to your heart, okay? And this can cause, is very serious and can cause serious illness or death, okay? So an embolism, which is the blood clot or air bubble inside your artery, could cause what we call cerebral embolism, that is an embolism in the brain, or pulmonary embolism, which is the same thing in the heart. Okay, but luckily he didn't get that. Okay, and it does say that whales aren't generally aggressive towards humans, so they think that this whale basically swallowed him by accident. Here we have a photo of a humpback whale reaching the water or coming out of the water, which is quite a magnificent sight, isn't it? Okay, and here we go. This is the last page here. I'll just go through it quickly. And the scientist at the New England Aquarium said that whales do what they call gulp feeding. Okay, so as we know, that's eating very quickly and big mouthfuls. Okay, so a whale has a big mouth. They would do gulp eating. Okay. And then the expert also says that it's a very unusual accident. This was a 1 in a goodness knows what trillion chance. Okay, so when we talk about something being very rare, generally we say million. Okay, so that's a 1 in a million chance that I would ever win the lottery. Okay, and he was saying this is even more rare than that, so it could be 1 in a trillion. Okay. As for Packard, he's not hanging up his diving gear anytime soon. We use this phrase to hang up something when we're talking about someone retiring, okay? So, and we talk about the specific thing that's related to their occupation. So he's not hanging up his diving gear. He's not retiring from diving, okay? If I was talking about a doctor, I might say, he's not hanging up his stethoscope anytime soon. He's not retiring anytime soon as a doctor, okay? For example, for a teacher, I might say, oh, he's not hanging up his, what does a teacher use? Maybe like a pointy stick. He's not hanging up his pointing stick anytime soon. That's a strange example, but you think of something related to someone's occupation, and then you use that to complete the phrase, okay? For a builder, you might say, he's not hanging up his hammer anytime soon, Okay. And then just finally, it says, in addition to his encounter or his meeting with the whale, he has survived a plane crash that left him stranded in a Puerto Rican jungle. To be stranded is just to be left somewhere with no way of getting home. Okay, so a commuter or a traveler could be stranded in one country if there are no flights to get home. A whale could be stranded on a beach. He can't move himself from the beach into the water. Okay? And you could be stranded in a jungle because you have no transport to get out of the jungle. Okay, but luckily he survived, and he says he'll probably be diving again in a week, which is pretty remarkable. Okay, well, that's the end of the article. So let's just go back to not sharing my screen. And I will say goodbye at the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. And I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Thank you.